Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Sustainability and Decarbonisation at the GCV Digital Forum. I'm Tom Whitehouse. I'm a contributing editor at GCV, and I'm delighted to be joined by Barbara Berger, who is head of Chevron Technology Ventures, who joins us from Houston. Barbara, it's great to see you, but it's also a great disappointment that GCV won't be in Houston this year for what would have been our fourth annual GCV Energy Conference. But never mind, we are reconvening online here and covering many, if not all, of the issues that we would have been doing in Houston. Thank you, Chevron Technology Ventures, for your support for this program over the last 4 years now. And it's our job to sort of start this session. We've got 3 hours or so of conversations with leading corporate venture capitalists in the sphere of decarbonisation and sustainability. And we'll be hearing from some CEOs of corporate venture-backed businesses. But let's start, Barbara, with me asking you first how you are. You look well. How is your team? Got a lot of questions there.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom, and I'm glad to be able to contribute to the forum today. So first of all, it was 60 degrees Fahrenheit this morning when I was running in the park. So everyone in Houston is absolutely giddy today because, we get through that hot, humid summer, and the first cool day, we breathe a sigh of relief. But 2020 has been a challenging year at so many levels. So I, want to first start off and say that, and no discussion of corporate venture really, can be had without that context. And so many things that we took for granted in 2019 have changed. The whole way we work, the health of so many people has changed and so forth. The economy has changed. Our industry has encountered numerous headwinds, both from a supply perspective, but also from a demand perspective. And that has certainly given us a lot of challenges. Our company has, I think, put a strong plan and executed well through this, but it has been challenging. And now I get to CTV. I always have to mention the mothership before I get to CTV. So first of all, really proud of my organization, despite all of that. And, the things going on in their personal lives, the changes in how we work, the changes in how we engage the ecosystem, other investors, the change in how we gather or not gather physically. They've done a really good job. They've stayed focused on our objectives. And, I think we've cared well for our current portfolio companies. And we've added a few of them to the mix. So I think all good.
Good. Great to hear. I'm keen to hear about some of the investments you've made over the last 4 months or so, and the continuity that we see in the venturing strategy. I'm tempted also to ask you to tell us more about the piano in the background and to give us a tune, but let's leave that for another occasion.
That's right.
I'm sure it's been useful and therapeutic to have a piano in your office, shall we say, over the last few months. I should have brought my guitar, but let's. So the portfolio continues to grow. Particularly around the Future Fund. We'll be hearing later from Carbon Clean Solutions Limited, one of your portfolio companies that'll be introduced by your London-based colleague. But I saw also you'd invested in a fusion technology business, a first, I think, for you, and quite an interesting headline-grabbing investment. Tell us a bit more and tell us how it relates to Chevron's core strategy of really finding strategic value in your portfolio.
Sure. So let me back up and give you a little bit of framework, and I'll give you framework on sort of the energy transition, and I'll give you a framework on our investments, because I think if you see the two of them, then the fusion investment won't look so much like what are they doing, but it'll make sense. So on energy transition, decarbonize the core business, incorporate renewables into our operations, and invest in technology and scale to future energy verticals. So three prong, lots of good activity in each one, and there's a role for tech ventures, for startups, for the kind of work we do, really in all three. Obviously, the third one, invest in technology and then scale future energy verticals, is right in our sweet spot. If you think about how we invest, and you've worked with us over the years, we have two funds, two principal funds that we're investing out of. Now, these are 100% Chevron-owned funds, right? But one of them is the core, and that starts with our base business of Chevron, and it looks to where we need to go to compete and win going forward. And so it invests in technologies that can help Chevron do that. And obviously, the Chevron use is a big key part of that. The other one is the Future Energy Fund, which you mentioned, launched in 2018. That doesn't start with our assets. That starts with the future energy system. So we're looking at all those innovation trends, and we're asking the question of, how are they going to play out relative to the energy system? How might they play out? Because it's in the future. And then what do we need to learn about them? And where is the intersection with Chevron? So if you come back to fusion and you come back to some of our other investments, nuclear is seen to be a key part of the future energy system for that clean base load. And but the current technology and the current fleet has some real limitations. It has limitations on, cost, on safety, on, public perception. And so, there's quite a bit of innovation in both fusion and advanced fission. And so the team has done a really good job, I think, of looking at that space. And, we chose Zap Energy as our first investment in that. And you will see how it plays out.
We look forward to that very much. I guess Zap Energy is an example of what we're going to be talking about with our panelists who will join us shortly. It's this time it's different, or this time it's different. Is it? Question mark. I think 10 years ago, or even just a few years ago, a energy VC might have hesitated before investing in a fusion technology business, but now you're prepared to make this type of investment because now is the time, because the technology presumably has advanced. Yeah. So to sort of segue into the next session, Barbara, if to tell us, if you can, in a nutshell, about how you feel this time is different.
Yeah. And it's an interesting question, and I've gotten asked it 3 times in the last 3 weeks. So I think it's what we're all kind of saying is we know what happened in the early days, Clean Tech 1.0. And what's different this time? First of all, I think the investor class is different. The investors are, they know the time horizons and they know the scale, because if you have energy innovation and it doesn't scale, we might as well be playing my piano, right? It's got to scale because the energy system is big and the transition is not a small undertaking. So I think the investors are different. I think there's a lot more support for the entrepreneurs, which I'm very pleased with all the, the incubators, the accelerators at the university, government, nonprofit level at cities. So, a lot better ecosystem for them. I think the incumbent companies are making commitments and taking action in this area. Now we've been around for 21 years, but we were one of the few, and now I think there is a much broader sense among corporations and the current energy sector that we need to transition. And so I think all of those come together. It's still not going to be easy. Breakthrough technology that's needed. I mean, there are hard science and, science challenges and engineering challenges. But I think we're much better set up than we were 10 years ago. I'm also an optimist, but I look forward to seeing success out of this because, frankly, society depends on it.
Indeed. Okay, well, let's bring in some of our other panelists for this session. I think I'd like to start with Emerald Technology Ventures. We have the managing partner, Gina Domanik of Emerald Technology Ventures, who will hopefully appear on our screen shortly. Here she is. Hi, Gina. How are you?
Hey, Gina. How are you?
Good. Hi. Nice to see you guys again.
So we have a sort of LP-GP meeting going on here because Emerald Technology Ventures, based out of Zurich and Canada, Toronto, I believe, and Singapore now, I should add, Gina, counts Chevron among its backers, among its LPs, part of a very broad group, a diverse group of different corporations that work with Emerald to source innovation and, of course, to do some deals.
And I'll just make a plug for Gina. I think it's been 20 years. We've been 21, so who's counting? I think your model and your access, and you continue to do your geographic reach. We've been very pleased to be a limited partner of Emerald.
Thanks a lot, Barbara.
Yeah. So Gina, 20 years, as Barbara says. My first question to you will be, how things have changed. You've got a very different LP base these days. A much wider group of industries involved. Which means that there's a broader industrial base with a stake in sustainable venturing. Interested to hear also about some of the new strategies you're developing. I saw news of your new water strategy. We had a conversation about also the sustainable packaging. So yeah, a difficult one to summarize, but kick things off a bit with how things are different, some things haven't changed perhaps as well.
Sure. So first of all, things have changed quite dramatically. Not only the terminology has changed over the past 20 years, but as Barbara was saying, the ecosystem has changed quite dramatically. If I think of 20 years, you had some kind of today it's actually very nice to be kind of considered to be impact investor. Back then, impact investor meant kind of a charity, so we called ourselves sustainability, and it was very difficult, I think, even to get the message out. But also the deal flow back then was, in the early 2000s, was very, capex heavy, engineering projects, looking for someone who cares. And also, even though today what we do is 50% energy related, back then a lot of the deals were power generation, right? So that has changed dramatically, and the sectors, even within energy, a lot more capital efficient. I think the entrepreneurs understand capital efficiency a lot better than they did back then, and understanding the value proposition. And our co-investors have also matured, as we have, right? We've all learned kind of together over the past 20 years. So this is really, it's driving returns, which is great, which will, attract more capital. And we also see a lot of movement, if you like, on the sectors that the startups are actually targeting. So there's a much greater sense of urgency. And so that leads us, over the years we started very much on energy, included water. Over the years we added advanced materials, obviously added industrial IT a number of years ago, and now are also looking at, as you mentioned, kind of sustainable packaging, which is really affecting many kinds of players within the value chain. It's not just the traditional kind of packaging type of converters, but it's also the people upstream and those downstream from them. So I think it's important for us to recognize not just where is interesting technology, where could be a potential solution, but is there really an urgent burning need out there? Is there going to be the market pull which will enable those companies to be successful? And you know what, I think it's super important that people are involved earlier in the financing, whether those are government or regional type of activities or other funds. We've chosen to focus in early commercialization. We also find that to be the area where we have the largest impact as investors, not just being on the boards and giving them money, but also helping the companies to actually scale.
Good. Can you give us a sense, without going through the whole long list of corporations you're working with? I'm just interested, obviously, Chevron is a backer. Traditionally, you've been backed by other energy and chemicals businesses. But how about some surprise us with a corporation that has just started working with you recently? I can give you my favorites, but it's best if we hear it from you, I think.
Well, I think, Tüpraş, the Turkish oil company, has just recently joined. I think that, it's not surprising that they're an oil company, but it just shows you that corporate venturing, it's not just North America, Germany, the UK, and Japan, but it's really, we have Thai investors, major corporations now, Turkish. So you see that corporate venturing, it's not only rolling out, if you like, to the smaller size companies, but also to other geographies and to other sectors as well. So I think that's good. The community is getting larger. We've got almost 30 corporates and counting. So I think that's great news for the startups as well, because it means that these corporations who could potentially be early adopters of their technologies, they could be partners to them, they could be potential exit opportunities for them. It means that universe is larger and is really keen to reach out to and work with those startups. So I think that's all very good. So yeah, I would say Tüpraş just from a geographical point of view, but you also have other companies that are where maybe there aren't so many players within that industry, like a Michelin, who are really looking, or Sibelco, right? So you're looking for companies that have interest not only in their products, but also in how to improve their internal operations, right? So process optimization type of technologies.
Well, good. That's a good prompt to go further afield geographically and go to Australia to see if Mark Freeman of BHP Ventures, I think it's either very late or very early or both. But Mark, how are you? I think I see you're on mute, mate. So unmute yourself if you would.
Yes, thanks, Tom. And it's at the tipping point of late to early. It is square on midnight here.
Okay. Well, you're doing very well. Well, thanks. I think you've done the best of all our speakers to work with the time, but I guess you're used to it. So, BHP, we've seen you do some venture transactions over the years. I know you've co-invested with Barbara in a couple of transactions, but you've got what looks like and sounds like a kind of new strategy. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It's a new strategy. More so, it's just formalizing what we're doing in an ad hoc way as we start to realize, the extent of the opportunity in venture for our sector, for the company, and we're trying to do it in a much more systematic and professional way. In a way, listening to Barbara's strategy, what we're doing is not that dissimilar, and mining as a sector is, in some extent, behind the energy sector, but catching up and following that blueprint, whereby we're utilising the corporate venture vehicle both to drive innovation in the core and ensure competitiveness in our core asset. And there is a decarbonising element there, no doubt, in our scope 1 and 2 emissions, but also in providing growth. And that's growth in our core business, through looking at alternative extraction technologies as well as exploration technologies, and then growth in the business itself. And some of that ties in with what Gina was saying around, and even Barbara, around new business verticals and what the BHP of the future could look like, which could be, quite different than the BHP of today in 50 to 100 years. And ventures is, a way to seed that. BHP Ventures, as we have it, is, as you say, we've done the ad hoc ventures transaction before, but this is going about in a much more systematic, arguably more traditional corporate venture form, like some of our peers.
So what can you tell us about what deals you have in the pipeline? Obviously, I don't expect you to divulge what you're working on, but yeah, I mean, you've got a big climate focus, and the few investments that I've seen that you've made are in that area, in carbon capture, for example.
Yes.
Looking forward to seeing, as you say, what you can do to further your markets to increase demand, perhaps for some of the metals that you're producing, which of course crucial in several clean tech applications. Yeah, a difficult question, I know, but what can you tell us about what you'll be investing in? What can we expect?
There's lots, and it spans all those areas, including some low-hanging fruit, like companies that have proven themselves, say, in energy or elsewhere, that could come across to our sector, and some of those are unusual sectors that you wouldn't think would target mining. That's sort of in our first bucket of that strategy that I went through. But as you touched on in your question, Tom, mining's quite different than oil and gas, whereby, yes, decarbonising and sustainability does present challenges, but the opportunity set's huge. And that includes in our core business, like our copper and nickel business, are really positively exposed to an electrifying world. Trying to find growth in alternative extraction technologies in those commodities, as well as other, what our CEO calls future-facing technologies, around, say, the battery supply chain, or even things beyond traditional minerals. That's an area of focus for us, both in exploration and extraction. Along the lines of some of the climate tech transactions you've seen, we look at things down the value chain, both relevant to our Scope 3 footprint in steelmaking, and looking at a lot of green steel, looking at hydrogen technologies. We're trying, at the moment, that's a hard one for me. Looking at recycling technologies and circular economy plays, waste to value plays. I mean, really at the moment, the sky's the limit and the pipeline's almost too deep, and much of it, almost unintentionally, happens to orient around that sustainability angle. Which in part, actually, just reflecting on it, answers the question this time. It's different. It's not just a regulatory push or a social push. There's a true business case in this, and a real economic case for the company and for the investments themselves.
Great point, Mark. Let's
Tom, if I have a minute just to
please
reinforce what Mark is saying, is that there might be a paradigm that the incumbent industries are, dragging their heels, but there are great opportunities, and you need to get in and see where along the value chain is there value, and where along the value chain is there an intersection with your capabilities. But, for every threat, there's a great opportunity. And so, Mark, I just wanted to reinforce what you're saying, is that it's not a Debbie Downer, back against the wall. This is an opportunity. And I think most of the corporate venture folks, that's part of the DNA, but I think even back into our corporations, that's the view.
Yeah,
I agree.
Okay, well, let's bring in a couple of the other large energy companies that you'll know well, Chevron, that Barbara, you'll know well, co-investing. Let's speak to Geert van der Wouw. How are you, Geert, of Shell Ventures?
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Thanks
for properly pronouncing my name.
I'm trying. Dutch pronunciation is a bit challenging. I'll give it a go, Geert. But
that's good.
But yeah, I think Mark was saying there that this, we've got new drivers here trying to create, I think, a lot of commercial momentum for different types of energy. Now, Shell Ventures, you've been in the vanguard of that for a while, but are you now discovering over the last few months that the parent company is actually more receptive to the renewable solutions you've been investing in, or indeed some of the EV technologies you've been backing? How is the parent company's relationship with the venture unit changing?
I think it has only strengthened. I mean, mind you, the trend towards energy transition and climate change in the large international oil companies was set in years ago, right? I mean, I think the COVID situation has only accelerated the opportunity. And so Shell, we have established a new energies business back in 2016, 17. And increasingly, we see that the things that we have invested in or that we are investing in Shell Ventures are being deployed in that new business, which is really encouraging. And at the same time, you see, tech companies like the Microsofts and the Googles and the Amazon in this world pledging large climate funds and looking for partners. And so that's an opportunity for us to partner and leverage the energy skills that we have in our industry with the same patient capital and long-term vision that some of these tech companies bring, and we are, in the end of the day, aligned along our zero carbon footprint ambitions. So it's good to see that you see the tech industry and the energy industry merging in terms of its interest and starting to collaborate.
Yeah,
so
I saw the announcement of Shell's collaboration with Microsoft. I think just a few days ago that came out, which I guess is symptomatic of the increasing digitization of energy, which is very different.
But it's also, you have to recognize that we are suppliers to each other. I mean, they supply web services to us and software and all kind of capabilities, and we are a supplier of energy to their data centers. And increasingly, data centers, by the way, are of course a large consumer of thankfully renewable energy going forward. And that's where the ambition is with some of these tech companies. So there's a real nice opportunity for collaboration between the two, where on one side we want to and need to digitalize our business and our companies, and on the other side, they need to kind of drive towards zero carbon going forward, and so that's where both industries meet quite nicely.
Great. Okay, well, let's bring in also now David Hayes in San Francisco, MD of BP Ventures America. Hi, David, how are you? And CIO, Chief Investment Officer of BP Ventures globally. I've come to you towards the end of the session, David, so I thought you might appreciate a bit of a rest.
I've had coffee, Tom, so I'm all good.
Okay. BP, you've been busy. There's been a lot going on. I saw your photograph in the BP Capital Days broadcast, which is a good sign. I guess it means that...
Apologies for that.
Yeah. No, I guess it's a reflection of what Geert was just saying about the venture portfolio having increasing relevance to the parent company. I mean, however much the energy companies are reorientating themselves to a lower carbon trajectory, it's what the venture teams have been doing all along. I guess in some respects, to you, it's business as usual. Carry on with your work. No. David, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, Tom. Sorry, seem to have lost you there for a second.
No, I was saying, so, there's been a lot of announcements coming out of BP, but for the venture unit, the strategy is the same. It's to carry on with the decarbonisation, increasing investment in vehicle electrification, etc.
I mean, yes, to an extent. I mean, I think clearly we've made some pretty large announcements in terms of what our future direction is going to be and how we kind of want to get there. And I think what it does talk to is the pace of innovation is going to have to increase in order to meet those objectives. So, we were born out of BP's original alternative energy business back in sort of 2007, and so what is different now is we're a much bigger commitment in terms of dollars to reposition us from an oil and gas company to an energy company. That's going to require a much more rapid pace of change. And I think in doing that, you've seen BP Ventures now supplemented with BP Launchpad, which is kind of our growth scale-up engine, and also an incubation group that's going to be working in much earlier on in the pipeline. And so I think what you're seeing is not only BP's commitment to ventures and kind of working with entrepreneurs and startups and bringing innovation inside, from outside in, but also then sort of trying to innovate at a much quicker pace than perhaps we have done traditionally. So, it's somewhat business as usual for the ventures team, but I think the envelope that we're going to be able to invest in is also broadening. So, a few years ago when we had the New Energy Frontiers model created, we moved from traditional oil and gas and some of the renewable energy stuff into advanced mobility and digital transformation, and those themes will remain. And what we'll probably add to that is an increased focus in renewable electrons. So I think geothermal's back on the menu after being absent for about 10, 15 years. I think hydrogen is obviously there. And I think to the points that Gert made, this is all in partnership, right? So not only has BP made the commitment for itself to get to net zero, there's a commitment to help people in the planet get there as well. And I think through our regions and cities solutions team, you're going to see us looking to find innovative solutions to help others decarbonize as well, whether that's industries, whether that's cities, whether that's regions. So to the points made earlier, this can't be done one company at a time. It's going to have to be in partnership. It's going to have to be through a collaborative approach. I think it's exciting. I mean, Bernard has said we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't good business. I think it is good business. The returns are there. Let's face it, we need to get there. We need to get there soon. So. Good.
Well, and we need to include other regions of the world which perhaps have been neglected. And that's what is the focus of Nikunj Jinsi of Future Capital. Nikunj is ex-International Finance Corporation and has an investment strategy which blends, correct me if I'm wrong, Nikunj, some regular venture capital with, as I said, a focus on emerging markets, but perhaps also de-risking some of the venture opportunities that can be found there.
Yeah, thanks for being on also. Yes, indeed. Up until about a year ago, I was with the International Finance Corporation, where I ran and set up and ran the venture group, where we put to work roughly $1.5 billion, both as a direct investor as well as an LP into GPs that are typically early stage in nature, seed and Series A. Around 12 years ago, we started looking exclusively at clean tech 1.0, I guess, much along the spectrum of renewables. And if you look at the title of this panel, is it different this time? And if so, is it? And I believe the answer is full-heartedly yes. What we did at IFC was, not just making investments in there and direct as well as into the fund managers, but we never gave up while our remit expanded. And the 1.5 billion we invested was not all climate technology, but the majority of it covered climate technology. Our remit expanded. We never stopped in investing into the broader climate technology space. And I think the need for that is much broader within emerging markets than people appreciate and realize. Especially post-pandemic, I don't think you have a choice other than looking at rebuilding in areas that are, will be along the green value chain and in sustainable businesses and industries, and looking at disruptive plays and technologies in disruptive new sectors are going to be critical. So a couple of examples in that that may not have been included in the earlier era in terms of sectors that one looks at, and I think some of the other panelists like Gina spoke about it as well. But a big area in climate technology is mobility and logistics. So at IFC, we had made quite a bit of investments into that space. Some notable ones in a company called Kobo 360 in Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria, that looks at using smart data and big data to apply it smartly towards the long-haul trucking industry, such that you'll have more efficient uses of cargo. Similarly, on the east side of Africa, in Nairobi, we invested into Trigger Foods, which is a supply chain play for perishable foods. Taking it further into the disruptive sphere, Earth observation, which 12 years ago I would have never thought of as being climate tech, let alone it being applied towards emerging markets. But invested into a play called Planet Labs out of San Francisco that has unique data sets that are able to monitor data that are very, very applicable towards both the mining industry, the agriculture industry. So it has strong implications on the food security space, which is incredibly important within developing markets. And I can go on and on. There are examples of sustainable packages plays, investments we made out in India. So the work is cut out for us. And so to your point, is there a use for this in emerging markets? Absolutely, there's a use. We never stopped. And after I stepped down at IFC, I've been involved in setting up a similar venture focused on climate technologies, which has a European base, predicated very much on the European Green New Deal. And so some of the lessons learned from the first round, if you will, is that, especially for emerging markets, the traditional venture model doesn't lend itself towards successes. You're seeing successes and use cases come out now, but they're very much driven by a whole bunch of stakeholders being involved, notably public market, policymakers and regulators being in the right state of mind, corporate investors, like many on this call, being properly involved, and also other financial instruments being involved in the investment side, as well as having more permanent capital involved into the cap table and the value chain. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, well, we've nearly run out of time. That went very fast, but I think what we have done is we've done a great warm-up for the sessions which are about to follow, where we'll have corporate VCs, starting with David's colleague, Nacho Jimenez at BP Ventures, introducing portfolio companies. We'll be hearing from others as well. Caterpillar are coming, Hyundai, HG Ventures, and others. But we'll get to that shortly. But like I say, thank you very much, everyone. I'm sorry we didn't have more time. I knew we would run into difficulties here. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to pass on any questions, but like I say, we will continue with these themes. I think we have established that, yes, this time it is different, although significant challenges remain. And let's continue the discussion over the next hour or so. But thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Good day. Thanks.
Well.